Parchments of Pergamum. Manuscripts were written on parchment, rolled, and then stored on shelves. In fact, the word parchment itself is derived from pergamum, via the Latin pergamenum, and the French parchment. Pergamum was a thriving center of parchment production during the Hellenistic period. The city so dominated the trade that a legend later arose indicating that parchment had been invented in Pergamum to replace the papyrus, which had become monopolized by the rival city of Alexandria. This, however, is still seen mostly as a myth, although parchment had been in use in Anatolia and elsewhere long before the rise of Pergamum. Parchment reduced the Roman Empire's dependency on Egyptian papyrus and allowed for the increased dissemination of knowledge throughout Europe and Asia. Manuscripts were written on parchment, rolled, and then stored on shelves. In fact, the word parchment itself is derived from pergamum. Parchment is a writing material made from specifically prepared untanned skins of animals, primarily sheep, calves, and goats. It has been used as a writing medium for over 2 millennia. Vellum is a finer quality parchment, made from the skins of young animals such as lambs and young calves. It may be called an animal membrane by libraries and museums that wish to avoid distinguishing between parchment and the more restricted term vellum. Today, the term parchment is often used in a non-technical context to refer to any animal skin, particularly that of a goat, sheep, or cow, that has been scraped or dried under tension. The term originally referred only to the skin of sheep and occasionally goats. The equivalent material made from calf skin was of a finer quality. It was known as vellum, from the Old French vellin or veline, and ultimately from the Latin vitellus, meaning a calf, while the finest of all was uterine vellum, taken from a calf fetus or stillborn calf. Now consider that in terms of abortion and how it's used in a current medical context in our days, and how this medical research being done with it, right, is being used to heal or come up with treatments for the living to help save their own flesh. How ironic. Now let's consider the metaphors available on this, right? Adam named his wife Eve because she would be the mother of all living, right? And in Genesis 3, clothing of animal skins were sewed together. You see, the Lord God Almighty made garments of animal skins for Adam and his wife and clothed them. This was after the fall. And the Lord God said, "The man has now become like one of us, knowing good and evil. He must not be allowed to reach out his hand and take also from the tree of life and eat and live forever." So God banished him from the Garden of Eden to work the ground from which he had been taken. After which he drove man out. He placed on the east side of the Garden of Eden cherubim, and a flaming sword flashing back and forth to guard the way to the tree of life. They were, in effect, clothed in parchments, animal skins. So one of the things that's so interesting about this, regarding Pergamum, Pergamum was considered the seat of Satan, the capital city of Satan, the adversary, right? The serpent of old. Now, why would that be? I mean, there's a lot of things that have been put forth, but one of the biggest things that's missed is kind of encoded right here in what I was talking about earlier. The city was known for its library. It was a thriving center of parchment production, and it had a large library, second only to the Library of Alexandria. And the library in Pergamum was specifically known for what we would call pharmaceutical sciences, right? What we would call pharmaceutical sciences or medical research, toxicology, epidemiology, right? Some would call it back in the day, particularly in the Middle Ages, alchemy. So it was essentially a center for biotech and medical research. So that they produce so much parchment, right, to be able to record the data, right, research, and then make it available in books. And during this time, it would be scrolls, right? A scroll is really a book, a type of book. And the fact that parchment was made from animal skins. How interesting. Isn't that what we do today? Isn't that what big pharma and biotech does? Gaining data, right? Research from animals and human beings. Now think about that. The research, the testing is done on animals and human beings as test subjects. Now, if you think about that in terms of the COVID vaccines, there's another interesting connection here. When you talk about vellum, the best quality parchment, it was made from the skins of young animals, such as lambs and young calves, particularly those taken from the fetus of those animals. Now think about what I'm telling you. Is this not exactly what we do today by selling the body parts, the fetuses of aborted children, to medical research? Do we still not test big pharma, vaccines, treatments on the flesh of animals and human beings? Now think about that. Now I'm going to reread something I read earlier, right? From Genesis 3. After Adam and Eve fell, the Lord God made garments of animal skins, right, to clothe them for Adam and his wife, Eve. He sewed animal skins together. He brought animal skins together, right? They worked it all together to clothe them. Now, I want you to think about that in a couple of ways. One, animal skins being flesh, your mortal coils, but also knowledge, understanding. But even more than that, right? When you think about that from an animal perspective, think about the beasts of the field, right? What was the Nakash, the dragon, right? The serpent of old. It was the most cunning, most dangerous, if you will, of all the beasts of the field. See the metaphor usage? Beasts, animals, right? animals. How interesting. Beasts do have skins, do they not? And what is the field? Well, the field is the world. And what is the beast? Well, the beast is the kingdoms, powers, principalities, empires, nations. Yeah. So here you have unified concepts that are both literal and metaphorical superpositionally in the text, in the story. So when it says, right, that Pergamum, right, is symbolically where the throne of Satan sits. And that city is known for medical research in its medical library, toxicology, right, epidemiology, pharmacological sciences, healing, and also killing. Now, I want you to think about that. There were two symbols that were associated with Pergamum. The rod of Asclepius, right? The god of healing, right? Whose emblem is a snake on a pole, on a rod, right? And the caduceus, which does not mean healing, it means commerce. It's the symbol of merchants, thugs, thieves, liars, and tyrants. Now think about that. That is the caduceus symbol. That is the most widely used symbol for the medical field here in the United States. If you don't know what it is, let me tell you. The caduceus is the rod with two serpents, one on either side, that looks like the DNA. Looks like DNA. They're coiled serpents on both sides. The symbology of that goes back to one being a king cobra, a viper, and the other being a python. The king cobra being a masculine symbol, and the python being a feminine. That, in biblical parlance, is a symbol for death in Hades, death in the grave. And how did sin and death enter into creation? It entered in through one man, and that would be Adam, and connected loosely to his wife Eve, right? But really, it came from the serpent, right? So both of those symbols, the one that means healing, the rod with the bronze serpent on it, which ties back to Exodus, the story in Exodus when they were in the wilderness, right? The Israelites were in the wilderness, and because of their rebellion, their sexual licentiousness, right? Their debaucheries, a plague of serpents, fiery serpents, venomous serpents came upon them, and Moses was told by God to put a bronze serpent on a rod, on a pole, and all that would look upon that pole, upon that serpent, would live. That was a foreshadowing of what Jesus would do on the cross for everyone. Right? That's actually a true symbol, right? But let's go back to this other symbol, caduceus, right? The caduceus symbol really is about merchants. It's about making money, and it's about thugs and thieves, really drug dealers. It's really the symbol of Pharmakea. Pharmakea being the ancient Greek word that means to drug or poison. So if you're drugged or poisoned, what is it drugging and poisoning? Well, your body, of course, first and foremost, right? Which is your flesh. And your flesh is instinctual, right? It's temporal. It is, in a sense, animal skins. So you're starting to catch on what I'm telling you here, what I'm showing you here. All of these symbols and all of these things are directly connected to where Satan symbolically has his capital or his seat, his kingdom, the capital of his kingdom. And what did Jesus say your enemy was? The flesh, your own flesh, the world system, the domination system which rules by it and through it and upon it, and Satan, the ancient serpent, the Nakash, the most cunning of all the beasts of the field. So when you're thinking of these things, right, and you're thinking about how all these things unify, which is what I'm showing you, and showing you the symbolic meaning and the literal meaning of parchments and what a parchment is, particularly that of vellum, which is made from the skins of young animals, lambs and young calves, right? And in particular, the finest being that was uterine vellum, meaning aborted fetuses, animals taken from the womb and then used as covering, as a paper. That was the most coveted type of vellum being the finest kind of parchment. Now, I want you to think about COVID-19 and think about the vaccines and how much and the connection to abortions and fetuses. In regards to what I'm telling you here about what a parchment is and animal skins and books. And when you think about that, and you think about how this world works, people are trying to clothe themselves, right, in their own righteousness. They're trying to do things in their own wisdom and works to save themselves, if you will, by misappropriation, misapplication, misuse, and the misleading of people with that information, having trampled truth underfoot and done their will to prosper, as in merchants, as in drug dealers, as in big pharma, making merchandise out of people and demanding, like we have going on in this country currently, that people hand their flesh over to them, right, to be test subjects for the elite. For their own good, even. Right? Now, I want you to consider how people are acting. Are they not acting like animals? What does Satan come to do? Kill, steal, and destroy. That is what the Nakash does. And that is the Nakash, the symbol symbolized by bronze or copper, but it's also considered, it's seen in the symbol of the red dragon. How about that? Where did COVID start? Wuhan. What else is connected to Wuhan other than just COVID? Well, it also happens to be one of the centers, right, for synthetic opiates and meth precursor chemicals that are shipped all around the world, and in particular to drug cartels in Central and South America and Mexico that are now flooding the United States and killing people. It also is a direct point of departure when people buy stuff online. Fentanyl, carfentanil. And what does that do? Well, it's a toxin. It's Pharmakea. Right? So they're being poisoned. They're being led to their destruction. Ultimately, the addiction leads them, if it's not broken and they don't get help, it destroys their life and the lives of others and leads them to the grave. In warfare, we would consider that biological and chemical warfare, right? In military. Unrestricted warfare, a form of weapons of mass destruction, but much more cleverly done in a covert manner. It just happens to be that the red dragon also, the serpent, is also not only cunning in such things as what I've discussed, but also cunning in war. That's why I call the 7 ancient military classics of China, right, a treatise. It is essentially the devil's playbook. I can take the concepts found there within and show you throughout all of history how it's been applied in all kinds of ways, including right here at Pergamum, which Pergamum wound up being the capital of somebody I've brought up many times, and that is Mithridates VI. He made that his wartime capital when he was fighting the Mithridatic Wars against Rome. And what was his specialty? What one of the things he was known for? Well, pharmaceutical sciences and toxicology. Now, that's just two of many things. He was a genius. And what did he do? Well, he tested his vaccines, right? What would later become Mithridatium, an antidote for being poisoned, and a protection for being poisoned, a vaccine, if you will, to protect you from all kinds of toxins. He developed it. And that's one of the reasons why he moved his main capital to Pergamum, because of the knowledge that was there that would allow him to continue to refine his alchemy, his Pharmakea, which he also implemented in warfare using the toxins, right, on the tips of arrows and swords and in other ways. It just happened to be that it was in Pergamum. He also would have these moments where he would go insane because he had been testing these serums, right, these vaccines out on himself. Once he knew that what to give himself that wouldn't kill himself. So he was basically building tolerances up, right? He essentially was an addict, in a way. He was terrified of dying being poisoned because of what his mother allegedly did to murder, his dad. Now, when he went crazy for these short moments in time throughout his life, from poisoning himself, he would make very bad decisions. Well, at Pergamum, he declared himself to be God. That was really the beginning of his downfall, although that downfall wouldn't come for many decades later. And when it did come, because he always kept poisons on hand, people that are into espionage and understand the Cold War, spying will understand this, and also those that understand the Nuremberg trial and what happened to a few people that gave themselves toxins and committed suicide. He kept toxins on himself so that if it looked like he was going to be captured or his family was going to be captured, they could take the poison that he had created and die instead of being tortured and raped and abused and paraded through the streets. That was Mithridates the Sixth, who, by the way, was called the King of Kings at the time. This was about 100 years or so before Jesus. His grandfather was well known in Jewish circles because it was his grandfather, Antiochus Epiphanes, who defiled the temple in Jerusalem. His mom, his grandfather, Antiochus's daughter, was Laodicea. The cities of Laodicea are named after her. The first one she built in her own name, while her son, her eldest son, Mithridates the Sixth, was roaming the wilderness, hiding from her because of many attempts on his life, and he feared that she would kill him. Now, you want to talk about dysfunction. That's a dysfunctional family. Now, that's some of the story of Pergamum. That's just one little tale of many, I can tell you. But isn't it interesting that the symbols that everybody is now so well accustomed to seeing, and everything is so up front and center on, all goes back to Pergamum? The pandemics, the vaccines, the epidemics of Pharmakea, opiates, synthetic opiates, meth, cocaine, all kinds of pharmaceutical drugs that are used wrongly. Satan comes to kill, steal, and destroy. And do you know when almost all those, if you look through, there's a pattern, right? Almost always out of war, it's followed by epidemics of drugs, criminality, violence, and moral and ethical degeneration. But during war, great technological leaps are made, especially in the means and methods of warfare itself, and the various technologies that are applied out of it, including across all the areas of human endeavor, across the seven spheres, and also medical sciences, pharmaceutical. How interesting is that? So there you have a convergence of many things, pattern-wise, coming together that all tie back to Pergamum and tie back to the very things that have been rerun over and over and over for all of history. So those of you that wonder why it is I bring up Pharmakea so often, to drug or poison, well, it's part of something called the three nets of Belial, or Belial by some, right? The three nets of Belial, or Belial, have ties to Pharmakea, to stolen wealth, health opportunities, and sexual idolatry. How funny is that? It's not. It is ironic, however, because there's a direct correlation, because you have an increase in sexual enslavement and addictions and perversions, starting from net number 3, right? Prostitution, human trafficking, all kinds of abuses, right? And isn't it amazing? It's always connected to thieves, to criminals, to merchants, to financial systems. And then that's net number 2. So net number 1 is pollution of the temple. What's the temple? Your body is the temple. And how is it polluted? It's poisoned by Pharmakea. When you misuse medicine, when you misappropriate, misapply, misuse, and mislead people with the information, meaning you're using it out of its intended context, you have corrupted it and corrupted them. That is a big deal. That is a pattern throughout all of history. So you start to see where I'm going with this and why it is that I'm going to break these pieces down and show you a pattern that is very, very important to understand, because you are living it right now. You are in the middle of this right now. So you should ask yourself why it is that you have people in the government and in commerce, particularly in big pharma, demanding you hand your children, your friends, your family members over to them to be test subjects, that they can gain more knowledge off the parchments of their own bodies. Which means they are looking at you like animals. Like you're a stock market, like they bought and sold back in the day when they did the same thing and treated humans that way, and are still doing so today in human trafficking circles. And wherever you find human trafficking, you will also find trafficking of arms and sex trafficking and drugs. How about that? All the things that are going on at the border right now, and all the things that you have people among you that are promoting. And how interesting that all this also has connections to things like abortion and the selling of human body parts, human fetuses. You see, there's nothing new under the sun. It's only repackaged in every generation to deceive, to try to hold on to power, to try to maintain control and power over people. But this is where it ends. This is the time it ends. And this is where everything is made known. And all things are made an accounting for. Because as it is for people, so too it is for the nations.
What you want is, but never what you want. Want it, but you never get enough. She wants everything. It's never ever enough. She wants everything. She's a model of soul. Never enough. Never enough for you. To fill up the hole, the emptiness inside of you. What you wanted, but never what you want. Wanted, but you never get enough. She wants everything. It's never ever enough. She wants everything. She's a bottomless soul. Never enough. Never enough for you. To fill up the hole, the emptiness inside of you. The emptiness inside of you. What you wanted, but never what you want. Wanted, but you never get enough. She wants everything. It's never ever enough. She wants everything. She's a model of soul. Never enough. Never enough for you. To fill up the hole, the emptiness inside of you. What you wanted, but never what you want. Wanted, but you never get enough. She wants everything. It's never ever enough. She wants everything. She's a bottomless soul. Never enough. Never enough for you. To fill up the hole, the emptiness inside of you. The emptiness inside of you.